like this with a good number of applicants at the same time. I'll do a brief intro on S2S. I'm probably going to miss a lot of things given I have an early onset of Alzheimer's. So Gus, Harp, Chad, and the rest of the S2S team, please chime in. So S2S, we started around 3.5 years ago. The goal is to help every veteran get into the best school possible by leveraging the TRAIN methodology. We'll describe TRAIN method in detail below, but some cultural / organizational things I want to highlight is we're a very flat organization. Everyone can call bullshit on each other, and we ultimately want to help veterans. So it's a free service. But it's a pay-it-forward service. So we want to help veterans, and we ask that those veterans turn around and help their other veterans. What we're doing is merely codifying what's happening informally, right? So I know veterans have helped me throughout every part of my process, whether in the Army, whether getting out of the Army, and even now to this day in the civilian workforce. And so that's what we try to do in terms of paying it forward. So if you use our service, please know that we do expect you to help other veterans in the future. Tracking, we'll definitely do intros, Gus. And then, actually, yep, let me stop right there and do some intros. So I'm Tim. I am a former Army infantry officer and just finished grad school at Stanford doing a JD MBA. And I'm now working at a startup in SF.
And I'm Gus. I am, like Tim, a former Army infantry officer. I graduated in 2011 from NYU Stern with an MBA, and since then I've been working in management consulting.
I'm Harp. My full name is Rahul Harpalani. I'm currently an infantry officer. I'm transitioning out, and I'll be starting at Columbia Business School in fall.
I'm Chad Burgess. I'm a former Army engineer officer. I'm an MBA 1 at NYU Stern.
I'm Anna Ivy. I'm a former lawyer and also a former admissions officer. I've written a couple of books on admissions, and I guess I'd be called what you refer to as a subject matter expert. I'm not a veteran. I'm the only non-veteran on the leadership team, but I'm here to offer the admissions expertise from the admissions officer side of things.
Thanks, Anna. And then also, I think we should just probably mention some of the advisors and partners that we have. So since we began in 2011, we've been able to get, in addition to Anna, some really top-notch advisors. Obviously, Anna's a part of our day-to-day leadership team, but others including kind of General Jim Mattis, Leston N., who is a former officer and on the board of USAA, Professor O'Reilly from Stanford, and then Craig from Craigslist provide us kind of strategic value. You know, not a daily interaction, but help us level set the strategy. And then we also have partners from GMAC that help us with getting kind of our viewpoint out, our perspective on the TRAIN methodology out. IAVA, Warrior Scholar, Veritas Prep, who provide scholarships for GMAT study, which we'll get into later. And then several college and other institutions that have partnered with us that we look forward for admissions advice as well as helping bring kind of the veteran perspective to them, and that includes Dartmouth, Amherst, and Yale.
Great. So I think I just want to continue talking about S2S in general before we talk about the TRAIN method. As many of you all know, we're kind of using the Google Doc applicant meeting agenda we sent out earlier. So if you want to use that, that's kind of a framework for today's agenda. So we're pay-it-forward model, and then, but keep in mind that some of our ambassadors haven't gone through S2S. So we actually just spent the previous hour talking to some ambassadors around what we expect of them and what we provide. And generally with ambassadors, if you have an ambassador that we're using for the first time, we try to have some quality control. So that means usually an S2S leader will be another point of contact in case the ambassador is not being responsive. And Gus and Anna and Chad and Hart probably have some thoughts, but in the past 3 years that we've done this, I can think of maybe one instance where there was an issue with an applicant saying they needed a more responsive ambassador. And then on the ambassador note, we're not here to just help JMOs into an MBA program or JD. We help folks get into other grad programs, and we also help veterans get into undergrad programs. And that's where our priorities are right now in terms of helping undergrads get into or enlisted get into undergrad programs. But that's not to say that we don't care or we're not putting a lot of time and thought into the JMO side. In fact, if there's anything where I feel very confident in our ability to be value add is in the JMO space, given how Chad, Harp, Gus, myself have all are in that same boat. So we know we deliver a lot of value in that area, but in terms of social impact and making a difference in this world and doing good, we think helping enlisted folks transition into undergrad institutions is where we can provide the greatest value. As our notes say, we're not interested in just helping veterans get into like Stanford, Harvard, Wharton, Kellogg. We want people to get into the best school possible. And then in terms of helping people get into those MBA programs, we want to make this, or grad school programs, we want to make this not just service to school, not just value add in terms of the application process, but also further along in your career. So whether you want to bounce off ideas around internships or pre-MBA internships, preschool internships, or scholarships, or even job advice, we want service to school to be a community of people who trade ideas, exchange ideas, help one another, and help veterans post their military career. And then in terms of services and information that we really strongly suggest all applicants use is our guidebooks. So we have an MBA guidebook. It's out there on the internet, and it's also on our obviously on our webpage. And if you have any questions, concerns, comments about the guidebook or stuff you want further improved, please contact Harp. So Harp is our executive director. His email is Rahul, Romeo Alpha Hotel Uniform Lima @serviceschool.org, or you can also contact us at contact@serviceschool.org. So please look into that MBA guidebook for those who are applying to MBA programs, because I think it'll answer a lot of your basic questions. And then we're also publishing first quarter of 2015 a JD guidebook. So obviously for those applying to law schools. I'll next talk about service to school and also the process. So what is it after you use our services, and how to use our services? So the first thing is to sign up on our website. Once you sign up on our website, Harp gets a message saying you've signed up for our services and you want to use us. Usually within 3 to 7 day period, definitely within a week, he'll reach out to you and say thank you for signing up and asking for additional information. Once you respond to that email, he will then match you with a ambassador who is similar to you in terms of the background and interest. I would say we try to prioritize based off interest rather than background. So if you're interested in an East Coast school, we'll try to match you with someone who's at an East Coast school. And ideally, if you're a woman who is from the Navy, we'll try to match you up with someone of that background. So that's kind of how your matching goes. And we always ask ambassadors before we mirror an applicant with ambassador whether or not they have the bandwidth and capabilities. And keep in mind, too, that a significant number of ambassadors, the majority, are folks who have used the S2S system, so they kind of understand what they're getting themselves into, and they also have internalized, in my view, like the pay-it-forward model. So, and then further along in terms of leveraging the ambassador network is if you're applying to multiple schools like many of us have and will be doing, please tell your ambassador this because we tell our ambassadors this all the time, that if they have any questions, concerns, or if their applicant wants to wants a larger network to leverage us. So if you look at just the people on this hangout, Gus went to NYU Stern, Chad is at NYU Stern, Harp is going to Columbia, I went to Stanford. There's already a diversity of people. And then there's a diversity of year groups. Gus and myself are 04, Harp is 08, I want to say Chad is 06. So there's just a breadth of kind of networks out there in turn to help you. So I'll now move on to the trade method.
Yeah, Tim. So let me hop in there just real quickly, and I can kind of kick us into the train method as well. So Tim's walked you through the process. So you've applied online. Harp has set you up. So the first kind of issue that you might run across is you don't get a response back from us. So what you should know is that we're a fairly manual organization. We're working on different things we can do with technology, but present day we're not there in a lot of ways. So if you don't hear back from us within a week, as Tim said, shoot us another email, let us know. Now you've met all of us, so you can let us know if there's an issue with that. Then you should be linked up with an ambassador. Your ambassador should be walking you through the train methodology. They should reach out to you within a few days and kind of outline some of the future steps that you can expect, what they'll do for you, what your expectations should be, and some general notes around timelines. So if that doesn't happen, then again, reach out to us, let us know. All of the ambassadors we have are top-notch folks. Tim had mentioned some of the schools that we went to, but our ambassadors have gone to all of the top 20, really, top 15 business schools. For law schools, we have several of the top 5 and others. So we have a really large breadth. So that to say is just if you don't get a hold of your ambassador, if your ambassador isn't being proactive with you, let us know, and then we can find a better person for you or someone that's a better fit. So once you get a hold of your ambassador, they should let you know what you can expect from them. And essentially what you should expect is the train methodology. So we like to say to win, you have to train. And train stands for test prep, resume review, application and interview review, application and essay review, interview prep, and networking. So the first part of that is test prep. So we really highlight for any MBA, law school, or college that you need to have a high score, either SAT, GMAT, GRE, or LSAT. So really your first goal as an applicant is to make sure that you have the test prep really high. And we don't have to get into maybe how you can do that, but what we'd really recommend is that if your ambassador isn't recommending, letting you know that, and letting you know kind of the resources that we have available, tell us. We have several resources for MBA and for GMAT and the SAT that we can provide to help you kind of free of charge work on those programs. But you should on your own go for some level of prep and review for test prep. So we definitely recommend that you, if you don't have the score you need for your target school, that you do some level of test prep review. We can help you with the GMAT and SAT. LSAT we can't, but we can give you some recommendations on some good test services. So for a minute, I'll just pause there and see if there's any questions or if anybody else has anything to add on the test prep aspect of the train methodology.
Yeah. I want to quickly add. I was in and out of what Gus just said because I'm trying to do some technical stuff. But he did mention that we have test prep services we can utilize, and we are actually underutilizing them. So a great example is Veritas Prep. They've given us free GMAT test prep services. So if you Google right now Services School and Veritas Prep, you'll see a blog post written by a current Services School applicant saying how great they utilize Veritas Prep services and how they got 750 on the GMAT. So Veritas Prep is one of the top test prep services, kind of like Manhattan GMAT, very well known, very kind of a very established organization, and they've given us the comprehensive GMAT test prep service. So if that's a struggle and that's a pain point, it's something that can be fixed. And we just had our ambassador meeting, and in that ambassador meeting, we kind of re-emphasized that the GMAT is one of those tests where it's input in, output out. Now I know that there's a number of you all that are not MBA folks, right? That are not looking to apply to MBA programs, and LSAT is one of them. So we do not currently have a test prep partner with LSAT. That's something we're working on, and that's something we'd like to have with like a test masters or power score. So please be patient on that. We do have a JD guidebook, which I mentioned already, that we're going to be releasing first quarter of 2015. That said, if you need that JD guidebook right now, please let Harp know, and we'll work something out, because I think it's ready to be consumed, but it's not ready to be like shared with the public. And then Anna just sent me a chat, which she thinks like Blueprint, which is a LSAT test prep service, offers discounts for veterans. So costs should not be something that prevents you from getting a great test prep score. And we tell every applicant, at least I do, that test prep is essential, and that that you should go and pay for test prep. If you have to pay out of pocket for it, it's worth it. And for those who are neither JD or MBA but are looking for just a grad school to do engineering or liberal arts, you'll need a GRE. And we also have GRE test prep partners too. So really, if you lean on your ambassador and ask them, hey, does S2S have pro bono test prep services? And then we'll get back with you. But the chances are pretty high, except for on the law school side. And again, I just want to emphasize that there's a Q&A function on the left side of the screen, and that's how you can ask questions, and that's how we can make this more engaging. So that's really all for test prep. If any of you all have any questions around test prep, please again hit the Q&A button on the left side of this hangout.
Anna, did you have anything to add for test prep?
No, just we'll happily support what Tim was saying. I know a lot of folks in the military haven't been taking these standardized tests. They could crawl, and so they're kind of foreign and weird in some ways, but it's the kind of thing you really shouldn't wait too long to check out. And in particular, some of the timelines that are out there, though, they might say, oh, budget 2 months to study for this thing. I know plenty of people who take a lot longer than that to master these tests. So give yourself plenty of lead time, because they're very important.
Yep.
I'll just caveat Anna, just kind of from my own experience with the GMAT. For each person, it does take a different amount of time. Some people can score 700 in like a week of study, and others it takes 6 months. And depending on which school you want to go to, you're going to have to get within that 80% range for most people, unless you have some sort of crazy military background. So yeah, don't underestimate how long it'll take. You know, start studying when time's on your side. I think I went from like a 590 to 650 to 700. It just takes you just got to put in the time. So yeah, you can get whatever school you want. Again, it just takes time for some people.
So moving to resume review. So the resources we can offer, besides having the ambassador look over your resume and provide input and feedback to that, we do have a booklet of kind of successful resumes, so a series of 6 or 8 resumes that you can use as an example to kind of kickstart your thinking. We do have all of our articles online and our guidebook, MBA LSAT, to help you think about what we recommend in terms of content and structure for the resume. And we do have some resume templates that you can use to get yourself started. So not all our ambassadors are aware of those resources. They all should be, but as we've said, we're kind of growing pretty fast, so we don't always have everyone onboarded as best we can. So those are resources that we have to help you get your resume where it needs to be. Tim or Anna or Harp, any other comments on the resume, maybe from an LSAT or undergrad perspective?
I would just say that, as a former admissions officer and a civilian, there is a real sort of translation gap. You guys speak a very different language from civilians, and so all of us on the S2S team and on the Ambassador Network, we're very mindful of helping you all translate your experience and your accomplishments for this very different audience. So that's something we're very sensitive to. and if need be, do run this stuff by civilians in your network too, because we don't want things to get lost in translation. We want you to be able to sell yourself as effectively as possible for this very new and different species.
And to second what Anna just said, a lot of times we'll see collectively, I'm talking S2S leaders and ambassadors, see resumes where your resume is like your OER copied and pasted. And to Anna's point, a lot of what you've done in the military needs to be civilianized. So saying you went on 150 combat patrols in the most dangerous area of Baghdad, and really doesn't tell people much. It's not something an admissions officer can say, oh, I know exactly what that means. And so
I remember the first time an applicant asked me, can I send you an OER? And I didn't know what that was. So even something that basic.
And then there's also formatting, which is, where do you put what? Do you put your education in the back or in the bottom? Do you put your education in the top? And where do you put your volunteering and hobbies? How does it go chronologically? Do you go in chronological order or reverse chronological order? Do you make a 2-page resume or 1-page resume? And so, and then short answer to them, and I'm sure some of the folks on the S2S team will disagree, but generally you should stick with a 1-page resume. Number 2, highlight education first, and then experience, and then background hobbies from top to bottom. And then I would go reverse chronological order. So then education, and then most present to the past. But again, leverage your ambassadors and leverage your and don't hesitate to contact the executive director. I would say that we're a nonprofit, we're a startup nonprofit, 1, and 2, we say this all the time, but we're like a plane flying as we're building it. So if you come across, don't let the systems in place, just like you all probably experienced in the military, don't let the systems in place hinder your progress. If anything, leverage the system. So Harp is kind of your go-to bat kind of guy, and he's a bull in a china shop, literally and metaphorically. So if you tell Harp, hey, I'm having an unpleasant experience with service to school, or I'm not getting the resources I want, Harp is going to go to bat with you and get you the resources. So your ambassador should be your first stop, and I would be very unpleasantly surprised if they're not assisting you. But if for some reason it's not responsive and it's not what you need, go to Harp, and I promise you, he can assist you. So I think we've covered resumes, and then with applications and essays. So application and essays. So application seems pretty darn straightforward, right? You put your name, your social security number, etc., etc. But there are some nuances which it kind of can pay to have additional input on. For example, what awards, right? Do you want your awards to replicate what your resume already has? Or what's your hometown? A lot of us have maybe not a hometown. And then there's stuff around even like who do you want to have write your letters of recommendation, right? That's a really complicated question. Certain schools want certain LORs, and certain schools not just want an LOR but want a peer recommender. So leveraging your ambassador and leveraging S2S as a whole in terms of what the application is like, you should definitely do. And Benjamin, thank you for asking the question. So love how Benjamin took the initiative and asked that question. So has anyone on the S2S staff had experience dealing with the waitlist process? The answer is hell yes. I would say there is not a application question around veterans that we have not addressed. So Ben, please follow up with an email to Rahul at serviceschool.org and to myself. So let's so actually we'll spend a minute to dial in on that question. I would say 1, you should, if you really want to go into that school, you should do a follow-up email. We have different philosophies about this. In fact, I remember an email chain a few months ago between Anna, Gus, and myself around what's the proper response. So the answer is very complicated, in terms of what you should do if you have been waitlisted. But there are things that can help you, and in fact, we can even refer you to a S2S individual who got off a wait list into that school. Gus, Anna, any other?
I'll say, to give you a good, because Tim's exactly right, but what I would do, it does depend on what, your situation. So if you do email us, we can take a look and see what it is. Oftentimes you're waitlisted for a variety of reasons. I think one we have a lot of experience with is waitlisted because of, and they're not necessarily going to tell you, so we kind of have to look at your application and make some hypotheses around it. The one we do have a lot of experience with is GMAT or grades, where the person has a really strong application, but the testing or the grades aren't quite there. So then there's some specific steps you can take to try to improve your case with admission. Other times it might be another reason. We even had an applicant who didn't know it at the time, but found out that their LORs were actually fairly detrimental to them. And so this applicant essentially had to reapply. So that might not be your case, but we would have to kind of look at where you applied, what your whole packet looked like to really help you decide what your strategy to get off that wait list would be. And then, Anna, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, ideally that's an analysis that you do for the overall application, right? Before you get to the waitlist stage, you should have a pretty good sense of what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are as an applicant. And then, as a former admissions officer, I will say that there are plenty of things in the waitlist process that you have zero control over that will determine the outcome. So, you have to be a little bit zen-like about it, and, you definitely want to do what you can in the waitlist process, but there are all these things happening behind the curtain that affect the waitlist management process from the admissions side. So you have to acknowledge that a lot of it really is out of your hands, and you do what you can, and then it's really not necessarily some of it's just not going to be a reflection on you. It's going to be a reflection on the constraints in the pool at that time, and sometimes it is good to reapply. Sometimes that shouldn't be the last stop for you guys if you don't get in off a certain wait list.
Yeah, and two macro strategies you can think about is one is applying to a breadth of schools that serve your needs, and then two is maybe waiting a year. If you have a good backup, you might want to wait and reapply next year. So some kind of elaborate on the damaging LOR. So let's just do a couple minutes on that one, but one is just the best way to avoid it is by just choosing the people that are going to write your application very carefully. Make sure that you're choosing people you know well, people that you've worked with for longer periods of time, maybe than a year, and that you trust are going to write a good recommendation. That's really the best way. A pure damaging LOR is one that just doesn't highlight, that speaks negatively of you or doesn't say that you have the skills you have or doesn't, isn't a champion for you. So you really have to do the research and make sure the person you're asking is a champion.
So Rebecca, I see your question regarding leisure recognition requirements from our professor. That's hard. That's really hard. I don't know if I have a simple answer just on this Hangout. I will say, to elaborate more on LORs, because this kind of goes into the bucket of application and essay assistance, is think about is you want an LOR who loves you. And I always say that. That's the first thing. That person needs to love you. And I don't care if it's a peer, if it's a superior. Obviously, sometimes they mandate that it needs to be a superior, but don't find someone who's a general or admiral that knows you from one incident where you shined their shoes for them, right? Because that means nothing. But if it's your company commander, or even your battalion officer or Navy equivalent, your ship officer, and they really will go up to bat for you, then you want to leverage them. And I kind of want to step back and be a little bit meta. So service to school, yes, we use the train method, right? And the train method is super helpful when you've dialed in and said, hey, Harp, I wanted to get an MBA at Cornell, or I want an MBA at Notre Dame, right? The train method is super helpful in that regard. But it's not helpful if you step back and say, what do I want to do post-military, right? And that's a question that I'd say we're pretty darn good at doing too, and our ambassadors are, just by virtue that all of us have done it, right? So the thing about S2S is there's people on one side who have done exactly what you have done, and there's people on your side who are thinking, what the hell am I going to do, right? And so I think it's super helpful to talk to many veterans because if you just get one data point, it's going to be skewed and it's going to be out of context. So talk to a lot of veterans, say, what are they doing? Where do I want to go? And is the school going to help you? So all of you who are presumably on this hangout, I feel, just given the background information you've given me, are like dead set on going to get a JD or MBA, etc. in 2015 or 2016. But for some of you, you all might still be thinking, why do I want to go to grad school? That's a huge opportunity cost where, and I need to support my family, or I have other concerns, and school is a prohibitive action. So I would leverage S2S in that regard to just explore first whether or not you want to actually proceed down that road. So that's one thing about an S2S. And then so Will Coxon, thanks for that other question. So is it typical Air Force so I'd say there's so many ways to go about doing that, right? The letters of recommendation. If this person loves you, you don't need to do that. Like, if this person loves you, presumably you can give them your resume, and this person can just like write it in the span of a week, right? But I don't think it's frowned upon. I mean, they don't even know, right? Like admissions officers. But I would say that that's probably a person you should think twice around asking LOR.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
I got this. Okay, so LOR, usually you need 2 months of prep time, but you can do it with less if you know the guy really well, which hopefully you do. Do a brag sheet is what they call it, or a prep sheet. So it's going to be your resume, and then it's going to be a few jobs that you've done, or a few specific instances of things you've done extremely well while under their command or while working with them that will just be a reminder for them. So basically, you're like setting the battlefield, IPB, intel prep of the battlefield kind of thing. You're prepping the battlefield so that when they're writing it, if they've been removed for a little bit of time, they can quickly recall specifics, which again, take that recommendation to a next level because it's going to have some specific instances or anecdotes about you personally. And then finally, like Will Coxon, like I know a lot of Army dudes sometimes will have you prep a recommendation, and I actually think that's totally fine, especially if you're far removed from the time you were working with them, or if they don't have an experience doing the actual application process or going to grad school themselves, and you can specifically like hit things that an AdCom might think positively versus things that like an Air Force officer, an Air Force board might think positively. But it should be collaborative, and I think you have to like force him to continue to really like make it his own recommendation, even if you prepped like 80% of it. I know that's not a great answer, but it's one of those things that you're going to play by ear based on the situation and based on what kind of recommenders you can call. But just like Tim said, the most important thing is to choose guys who love you, and if that's possible, that usually works out extremely well because they're willing to put in the hours to get that perfect polished resume, or excuse me, recommendation on your behalf.
So, A's application and essay assistance. Essays is another area where I think S2S offers a huge value, just given how oftentimes I know personally when I write an essay, I don't want to look at it again. And that's where I would leverage your ambassador, right? Leverage your ambassador and leverage your ambassador's friends. And not just leverage your ambassadors in the sense of providing feedback, but let's say you're applying to 6 schools. S2S, I would be shockingly surprised if we don't know a veteran who's either been to that school or at that school. So certain schools obviously have school-specific ones, and so you should leverage your ambassador for that. And for law school, right, those who need to write a personal statement, that's a 2-page personal statement, and every single word in that personal statement needs to be dialed in. You can't waste a single word in 2 pages when you're applying at law school. So essays is tremendous, not just for grammatical reasons, but for thematic reasons. I find that veterans who write an essay right off the bat, usually around future goals or even around why that school, it's poorly structured, and so draft and continue to edit, and it'll be better. Essays are like a sculpture. You just have to keep working at it until it's like refined to like its essence. So the last two steps are interviewing and networking. I know interviewing doesn't apply to everyone because law schools typically don't do that. But interviews, in terms of the service we provide, is your ambassador is going to be your first mock interviewer. So most likely they'll do a hangout like this where you and her or him will do an interview, and then leverage S2S again if it's a school-specific interview, because certain schools have different policies. Some want an alumni interviewer. Some have veterans interview veterans. That's actually a fairly common process. And then some have admissions officers interview applicants. So talking to a veteran at that specific school can be really helpful. But just like in essays, I think a common theme should be practice, practice, practice. And I found that Clear Admit, I think, has like a list of questions that previous applicants write down, and so like they have a list of questions that have been previously asked from those schools. So that's also a pretty helpful resource, and I think it's like $40 to pay for that. And then the last one is networking. So networking is a dirty word if you're in the military, and I think if I would interpret it, it would be I wouldn't say it's networking, but it's more trying to figure out what you don't know, right? So S2S and the people involved in this are resources for information that you don't know, and you should leverage us. And then networking involves not just getting into school, but also thinking about, as I mentioned already, scholarship opportunities, pre-MBA opportunities, MBA internships, and job-wise, right? Gus is already out there in the workforce. Chad's doing an internship while at school. Harb is going to likely be doing a pre-MBA internship. I'm working right now, so use S2S not just to think about schools and why schools, but also and how to get into a great school, but also what's next in terms of your life. I mean, Ben, right? Ben, who's been asking questions, some great questions, and continue to send these questions. He's partnered with Amy Daschle, right? So Mike and Amy Daschle, Gus and I can definitely recall, were one of the first applicants, right? And they were a husband-wife team, and are killing it, right? They both went to Wharton, both graduated, and are doing exceedingly well. And so leverage the S2S network, not just with applying to schools, but elsewhere. And again, I think another major reason why people who have gone through S2S or people who have joined S2S are so helpful is because we believe in the pay it forward model, right? Like I strongly believe that one of you guys in this hangout, one day I'll probably be working for you. And so maybe in some ways I'm not that intrinsically like about helping people, but like just fatalistic about knowing that some veteran will one day like be a Fortune 500 CEO. So we don't have much time. Please, if you have any questions, annotate it through the Q&A button on the left side of the screen, and also.
Sorry.
No, that's all I have.
Okay, yeah. So we do have one question. Again, thanks everyone, and please leverage your ambassadors, as Tim had said. So I mean, what I would recommend is that gap. That would be pretty devastating, I think, to your application if you didn't have something lined up. So I really think it's incumbent on you now to one, look for something that's impactful that you can do in that time frame. So something like a fellowship, Teach for America. There's some programs similar to that you can do in that year that help you apply from a position of strength. The second thing is apply to enough schools so that doesn't happen. If you are dead set on going to school in 2015, make sure that you allow enough schools that you can accomplish that goal. And then the third thing would be to stay in the Army or stay in the service another year. I think both those three things allow you to apply from a position of strength. If you don't do that, then it's a big risk for you. Stephanie, so we don't have a forum right now. So Stephanie's question, is there a forum where we can post our resume and get some feedback? We would ask you to, and again, Teach for America, when I applied, it wasn't as hard as it is now. So Teach for America is really difficult to get into nowadays. So that might not be the best option. But in terms of a feedback, what we'd ask Stephanie is to give it to your ambassador first and allow them to provide feedback. If you're not happy with the level of feedback, let us know and we can take a pass at it. Generally, we found that a couple iterations with your ambassador pretty much get what you need. Good questions. Thank you.
So I would say personally, this is the best time to hit up Service to School, just given how all of us are on our winter holidays or winter school break. So if you haven't already, sign up for Service to School. If you haven't already, like if you're ambassador, by going to HARP, don't feel like you're like jumping your chain of command like in the military, right? Like I know like I would never like try to go above my company commander or I would get backslapped, right? So like going to HARP is like is not going to IG. So leverage, I guess just hit up HARP if you have any questions. It is not anything too small. He will not say go ask your ambassador. He will say how can I be helpful. HARP looks mean, but he's a gentle giant. All right. Again, please feel free to send any questions you have on the chat function. In the future, we'll probably try to do more interactive hangouts so that you all can actually join the hangout and we can see your happy, smiling faces. But this was just something we wanted to test, given how there's 15 viewers and Google Hangout wouldn't let us. It's not technically possible to do that. We're gonna hang out for a few more minutes. So yes, we said that that this was gonna be an hour, but we're available for the next 5 to 10 minutes. So feel free to stick around and ask any questions that come up. More importantly, hopefully this is helpful, and we hope you find S2S to be helpful in your own application process. So, James, due to a low GMAT score, I'll be pushing my application to round 4. Is this going to be a lot harder for me now? I am one that's transparent and kind of straight to the point. Yes, it's going to be super hard, right? It's going to be hard as shit. And so I would even think about, yes, you should apply if you want, if timeline makes sense to apply round 4, but you might even actually want to wait another cycle. Especially if you're
James, James, I'm working with James. I'm sorry I didn't respond to you sooner, but Tim's exactly like I think that we had talked a little bit about postponing, and if that's just not feasible for you, I did get in round 3 with 670, but just barely, and I had like a really good GPA and I had a lot of really good extracurriculars, but I barely got in. I had a 670 in round 3, and I got in NYU and I got waitlisted at Columbia. So it was, and I just applied those 2 schools, so those were both very. It's really challenging. It can be done, but I would just make sure you have the right backups. Make sure you're applying to a lot of schools, but really throw yourself into the GMAT, and we need the Veritas to help out with that.
Yeah, as a data point, I was round 1 in terms of MBA, and I felt it made a difference because I feel I tell people that, and I tell people schools have a set number of veterans that they want to help, right? So like, or not help, but they'll admit. So if you look at traditional, the numbers of admits at like the top 50 schools of how many veterans they want to admit, there's a certain quota. You're not going to see at Wharton 75 veterans, right? Even if 75 veterans have 800 GMAT scores. So yeah, apply round 1 because there's probably going to be another infantry officer, West Pointer, or ROTC that's applying round 2. So if you apply ahead of her or him, it'll be helpful. And then that goes to another point, kind of around what S2S is about. So yes, we are all about boots on the ground in terms of doing direct services, but we also think of ourselves as a policy organization. So one thing that we're pushing on doing is around fixing the GI Bill. So Anna co-wrote an op-ed around that in the New York Times. Another thing is looking at possibly pushing some policy around having MBAs admit more veterans. So Will Coxon, I see your question.
And Stephanie had one right before that. Stephanie's question was around, do we provide an analysis on the student overall packet? What is the bottom line GMAT score, and how many schools would you recommend applying to per round? So we don't do it, but it's not because we don't have the capability. It's just that most of those analyses, I think, are a little flawed because they don't necessarily take into account some of your goals and what you want to do from a strategy perspective. And they also, I think they give a false sense of security in terms of analysis. So I don't think we're ever going to do an analysis, and I would recommend that if you get an analysis from anyone else, that you take it with a grain of salt. I think with your GMAT score, depending on where you want to go, if it's one of the top schools, the goal should be to break 700. But look at the GMAT range and make sure you have a score within that range where you're looking to apply. And then, sorry, the questions are coming fast and furious. The other part of that was how many schools to apply to. Again, it depends on your goals, your timeline, and your flexibility. So I think that I only applied to 2 schools, which was a gamble, but it worked out. But I think 5 to 6 schools is typically what we see. That might be different for you depending on what you want to do after, what you want to do into the future, career-wise.
So Will Coxon, your question is around timeline for submitting applications. Is general sooner is better? Is there a point where you really hurt your chances if you haven't applied specifically for law school? I'm not sure I understand the question, but I'll try to interpret it. I'll try to answer it as I interpret it, which is yes, there's a point at which applying sooner is hurtful, right? If you know you take that December LSAT score the test and it's going to boost your score by 3 or more points, it's probably wise to wait. And likewise, if you don't have your personal statement locked and ready to go, you don't want to submit that. So it's a balancing test, which you'll soon hear all the time in law school, balancing tests. And then that's awesome that you're enlisted. I would say there are other opportunities in terms of a gap year. Chad can probably talk to you about it. Chad did a gap. I don't know if he'd consider it a gap year, but Chad worked at John Deere before school and after being an engineer officer. There's also veteran opportunities like what is it? Joe Kaplan did.
There's a good thing too if you get out in the summer. A lot of banks are doing internships for guys, and the goal of these internships are to hire people on full time. So if you can segue into an internship or something like that at like a JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs where they do want to hire vets full time, that can kind of hedge your bets there. So if you don't get into school, you're still solid where you can get a full-time job. And if you do get into school and you do decide to go that route, you can talk to the job and tell them, hey, I want to go to school. And then you have an opportunity possibly for next summer if you want to do an internship. So there's a lot of good opportunities out there. And I don't think you have to be so rigid on that 2-year enlisted contract. So there's definitely other options out there for you. I mean,
all right, I am going to drop off. I appreciate everyone joining this call. And again, perhaps the 2 most important takeaways is you can contact Harp at any time. He goes by Rahul at serviceschool.org, Romeo Alpha Hotel Uniform Lima. And you can always reach out to us at contact@serviceschool.org. Happy holidays and wish you all the very best in all your future endeavors.